Barossa Australia has been running demonstration vineyards all over the Barossa for about the last 9 years. We've set up and taken down probably 9 or 10 demonstration vineyard trials, mainly to, I guess, trial things like mid-row treatments and under-vine treatments against the grower's current method to see what the difference is in the fruit maturity and the end resulting wine. So that's been a really successful program. They're not scientific experiments, they're just demonstrations so that we can take the growers out to the vineyards and they can see our treatment against the grower's current method or the control, if you like. Today we're focusing on the demonstration vineyard trial at James Rosenzweig's vineyard. This is the 3rd year we've run this trial, and we've got mid-row treatments comparing cover crops to bare soil to volunteer grass, and we've also got under-vine treatments comparing bare soil, dura mulch, straw and rustic mulch. So today, Mandy Marder is going to talk about the 2022-23 season results. And as some of you know, as Dom said earlier, Mandy won a grant to develop her bunch weight measurement and real-time tool, which we've been able to utilise in this demonstration vineyard this year. So it's been absolutely fantastic to see.
So yeah, as Nicki was saying, we're doing a quick presentation on the results from this year and the previous growing season in the Barossa Australia demonstration vineyard trials. We're going to just go through a quick outline, go through quickly the trial design, look at water relationships, the vine behaviour, and also we'll delve into nutrition as well. So the background and the aims of this trial, mid-row and under-vine soil management techniques is an often discussed topic amongst growers. It's great to extend upon existing under-vine mulch trials. Also, this trial was set up to provide some quantification on common issues. Also, as Nicki mentioned, this trial has been running for 3 seasons and we still have 1 more season to go. And as part of that, soil health will be assessed, chemical and biological analysis. So once next year happens, we'll have another data set to have a look at with regards to those results and add a knowledge base to our growers to help them to support in their decision making. So we have quite a large map here. You'll see some triangles. They're the soil moisture monitoring from the green brain, and we also have temperature sensors where you've got the sensors located on the vine cordon at 1 metre high. So all the treatments received the same irrigation. They all received the same nutrition, where diammonium phosphate was applied at 50 kilograms a hectare. And we also had two bunch weight measurement devices continually logging from veraison through to harvest this season. So we'll extrapolate some data from the results from those as we move further down the slides. Other indices that were analysed are pediols, maturity data, including your pH, BOME ATA. We also analysed yan, colour, tannin, bud fruitfulness, and berry sensory analysis as well. So this is just a picture of the trial design, just a visual, what the mid-rows look like on the 29th of October, back in 2020 when the trial was first commenced. So up on the top left, we have the cultivated mid-row. Underneath that, we've got the volunteer grasses, which look quite lush and green. And we have the low mow and herbicided and the high mow only. So as we've come across 2 interesting growing seasons, quite contrasting. So this is a quick snapshot that Chris knocked up for me last night or the night before, just outlining that the previous growing season we encountered more heat waves, lower rainfall, and then this year we've encountered, as we all know, less heat waves and higher rainfall. So depending on, given that we've had 2 contrasting seasons, you're going to find different results across the treatments, and James might delve into that a little bit more later on. as we move through. So now we're heading in towards water relationships. So what we have here is a graph of soil moisture expressed as percentage, where we've placed the sum value between the 0 and the 40 centimetre. And what we have here, this is the undervine. So you can see the bottom green line there, that represents the grasses. So the grasses really extract soil moisture out in comparison to the straw. The straw still retains water, but overall in this particular case, definitely the grasses extract more. And you can see in the cultivated treatment, soil moisture is certainly more retained in that treatment. So yeah, that's quite interesting to know. Certainly food for thought and creating a discussion point. So as we move along further, this represents the mid-row. So mid-row average soil moisture expressed as a percentage from the 20 centimetre below the ground to the 60 centimetres for the period of the 10th of October through to the 10th of March. And as you can see, certainly a similar relationships happening in the mid-row as to the undervine, where we can see that with the grasses, soil moisture has certainly been drawn out at a much steeper rate in comparison to the cultivated, where the soil moisture content percentage is higher, but it's also taking a longer time to drop out as we're sort of heading towards January. So that's another very interesting observation as well. Okay, so now we're talking about the rainfall impacts on the continuous bunch weight data logger that we placed in the grasses and in the straw section. So on the 29th of March 2023, we had a bit of a rainfall event, 10 millimetres. So what we've got plotted in blue is the actual soil moisture content from that particular rainfall event. And as you can see, bunch weight started to increase around 3 o'clock in the afternoon in the grasses. You can also see it's interesting to note with the straw, I guess the soil moisture doesn't come up in a nice tidy curve because I guess the rainfall's got to filter in through the straw. But still, we had a similar response. So around 5 o'clock in the afternoon, we had a response in bunch weight in the straw treatment, where it certainly did increase by, we're probably talking about 20 grams here. I guess that's one of the reasons why we're not so good with our crop estimates, because we have such a huge variation in bunch weight in response to rainfall. So yeah, certainly new learnings in this area. Okay, this is another graph here outlining the orange is the continuous bunch weight logged in the straw treatment. You have all these nice spotty sections here. That's the diurnal temperature. So you can sort of see with those spots, the spotty section, we've had a couple of 35-degree days Celsius. And so James decided, oh shit, better put a 6-hour irrigation on. So back here earlier in the time frame, I think it's on the 23rd of February, James applied a 6-hour irrigation. It wasn't long after that there was a spike in bunch weight, and then bunch weight tapered down again and stabilised. So this is quite a unique data set in which we could use to maybe refine our water use efficiency and, make pertinent decisions on, do we have to irrigate again after this particular event? So certainly another new learning. Okay, so here's exactly the same graph, but we've also got this erratic green line here outlining the grasses. So you can see the bunch weight in the grasses, certainly way more erratic in compared to the straw. Straw seems like the bunch weight in the undervine straw section was certainly more stabilised. And here we have another graph where we're comparing straw. So the bunch weight in the straw treatment versus the bunch weight in the grasses. So during a maximum temperature of 36 degrees, you can see that, the straw bunch weight didn't vary as much. Might be talking about maybe 10 to 15 grams in comparison to how the bunch in the undervine grasses, responded. We're sort of talking about maybe 30 plus 40 grams. So another new learning. We also plotted real-time bunch weight data against maturity analysis. where the red dots are representing, Beaumay. So this is quite an interesting data set, which winemakers and or growers could use as a tool to determine an optimal harvest date, and also have an idea on how their yield's tracking at the same time. Okay, vine behaviour. So we've got berry weight from the 2023 vintage, and having a chat to Chris and James last night on the phone, it's interesting to note where you got the blue line, you had a massive decline in the cultivated section. And speaking to Chris last night, his theory is that it's a release of additional nitrogen and moisture earlier on because the berries were quite large and the skins were also thinner, hence a higher risk of shrivel. So this occurred with the cultivated in the previous 3 vintages. So there was certainly a strong correlation here that, you get that decline in the cultivated in terms of the berry weight. And you can see the grass, the berry weight in the grass mid-row section, seems to be the lowest. And that's the result was quite similar over the last few years as well. So that's quite an interesting observation. So we have vine behaviour, grape ripening. So Chris wanted to highlight here the Duramulch certainly peaked earlier in comparison to the other treatment, but we had a lag in the cultivated mid-row. Chris was saying in 2021, it was a much drier season. The berry weight loss in the cultivated section was much more pronounced in 2021. Okay, we have another graph here outlining the time period of the average berry weight from the 9th of February through to the 3rd of March. This data was collected using the 200 berry sample technique. So you can see here that, the mown grass certainly had the lowest. And then we also had the cultivated where we had the sharpest decline in terms of slope. And you had the mown grasses and the cover crops sort of staying, sort of more central in the middle there. Okay, with regards to yield, vintage 2023, we can see, as highlighted in red, tonnes per hectare. The cereal, cover cropped and the cultivated had the highest tonnage per hectare. It's interesting to note, you had the undervine straw and the Duramulch. That sort of yielded approximately, say, 1 to 2 tonnes per hectare less in comparison to the cereal, cover cropped and cultivated. But it's interesting to note the undervine straw mulch and the Dura had higher average bunch weight. So I guess we're learning what's going on. In 2022, there wasn't much data collected due to the hail damage. That certainly upset the apple cart a little bit there. But even in 2021, we had a different result with regards to which treatment was yielding the highest compared to the 2023. So we can see that the undervine Duramulch, produced the highest tonnage per hectare, coming in at 12.9. And then we had the volunteer grass producing the lowest. So as you can see, seasonal variation certainly impacts yield under the differing treatments. Grape composition. So take home message here with these 2 graphs, these 2 spreadsheets, is we had up the top 2021 and down the bottom we had 2023. The highlight is here is the yams were higher in the cereal cover crop and the cultivated in both instances in the both years, both in 21 and in 2023. It's interesting to note that the volunteer grass mid-row that's mown had the lowest YAN value. However, a value of 177 by no means is too low. So that's just some interesting observations that we noted from the grape composition analysis. So we have a frost risk, as mentioned before. There was temperature sensors on, located at 1 metre high on the cordon. So this is a low temperature period from 7 p.m. on the 26th of September through to 7 a.m. on the 27th of September. So you can see, we certainly got a little bit low there. This is just to highlight that, some years, your straw mulched undervine areas may not yield as much, because as you can see here, with regards to the temperature, the straw mulch undervine at 5:30 a.m. got down to minus 0.104, which was the lowest in comparison to the other treatments. So hence that was also, handy to know. Okay, PDO results were collected both in 2020 and 2021. And as we look at the nitrate, nitrogen and the total N, as highlighted in red in both 2020 and in 2021, the cereal cover cropped and cultivated had much higher nitrate, nitrogen and total N. And we can see here also, as highlighted in blue, the volunteer grass mid-row mown, both years in consecutive, had the lowest values of nitrate N and total N. So after chatting to Chris Rogers and James last night, we come up with the conclusion that cultivation, it increases the rate of mineralisation of organic matter to a plant available nitrogen. This mineralisation process was quite rapid due to that, you had ample soil microbiological function. And as we looked at the graphs before, the soil moisture content was higher in the cultivated section. Okay, so we're still on water relationships. So we're going to look at the vine canopies on the 4th of March 2021. You can see that the cultivated, what you're supposed to see in the cultivated is active shoot tip growth, large canopies, you've got high soil moisture content, and you've also got higher nitrogen. It's supposed to look quite lush and green and happy. And then directly underneath it, you've got the volunteer grasses. Yeah, the vines look a bit stressed, got a bit of yellowing going on there, not much active shoot tip growth. So these are some of the observations that were noted from Chris and James, based on the contrast between the treatments on how the canopy is behaving. So the low mow herbicide and the high mow only sort of come in between. They weren't too stressed and they weren't too active. Project sponsors, we'd like to acknowledge Wine Australia, Barossa Australia, James, Rosenvale Vineyards, good job. Jeffries, Farmer John's, Caitlin and Sean, if you're in here. LG Vineyard Services, Lincoln Grokey, Tractor Tread Vineyards, Steve Schiller, Dorian Estate. VineScout myself. We'd also like to acknowledge James again as acknowledgements. Thanks to Nicki Robbins from Barossa Australia. Chris Rogers, who's been instrumental in this project. Rogers Viticulture, Kirsty Waller, Anna Cameron, Adam Peach, myself, Barossa Australia, Sterling Vineyard Services, Green Brain, Eurofins and AWRI. I think that's it. Thank you for your attention. I'll hand you over to James.
What I thought I might do is just run through some of the slides again, just to jog a little bit of memory and make a couple of comments of the growing season, I guess, and what we sort of saw, and perhaps where I saw some of the changes that we might have made. So probably the only thing I can change in the vineyard management part of it is when we put on a dripper irrigation schedule. And I think we put out 3 6-hour ones this year, if I'm correct. So that slide says to me, with the blue line and the amount of moisture that's in that soil in the cultivated row, and what we saw this year and where the growth went, how the berries looked, how the fruit tasted at the end of the season. Through the rest of our vineyard, our main goal was to try and pull our vines back, which I'm sure everyone was trying to do this year. And it clearly showed that all that extra moisture in a wet year is only going to contribute to all the problems that you're going to have further down the year. Now, we were really blessed with an excessive spray program this year and probably some lucky timing that we didn't have any disease issues in that vineyard. But it's a high vigour site. Traditionally, we'd put no nitrogen value or any sort of fertiliser except for a foliar application is all that whole site sees. Since we've been doing the trial, the nutrition it's got at cover crop has made a real visual difference to how green the vine actually looks. I wouldn't say it's any more vigorous as such, but it's when we get that luxury level of moisture come through, it all just gets pumped straight into the vine in a wet year. There's nothing left in the second half of the season to benefit the vineyard. So for me, having the grass rows, actually the green line showing we depleted that moisture early was something was actually good to see. So I didn't see any of these slides until last night. And all the moisture monitoring I don't use, there's no other probe other than the one that Chris controls, and Chris and I don't actually talk about soil moisture. It's about if I can try and manage the vineyard within reason. We noticed this year that the vines looked healthier with that little, I think the nitrogen coming from a cover crop is carrying through for the rest of the season, where the rest of the vineyard looked quite pale by comparison. So the vineyard that's outside of the control. No, not that one.
This one?
That one.
That one.
So that one, we've got the two irrigation lines at the top coming down. For me, the maturity really come to a halt after that second one. So we had that hot week, and I thought, put a bit of a sympathetic irrigation on just in case I got it wrong. So I'm not looking at probes, I'm just looking at the vines are doing. The control grassed rows were behaving quite well. We really just didn't look at the cultivated because you just can't manipulate that in any way. And then even the straw looked a little bit like it was struggling a little bit, but probably for not the reasons I thought. Mulch looked good. So I put on another, it was either a 4 or a 6 hour irrigation there.
That was sneaky.
Yeah, so I nearly got under the radar, but for me it showed I didn't need to do it. I feel that graph sort of shows to me that I upset the ripening curve by a good week. And I just wonder whether my question is then would I have been harvesting a week earlier if I hadn't put that one particular irrigation on? So then we can flick through.
Yep.
The berry weight changed with the heat periods of the day and so forth. And talking about, we were seeing a 40 gram difference in weight. So if we saw 40 grams on a 140 gram bunch, that's a fair percentage. Would the quality of that wine be any better than if it was picked 12 hours later when the bunch weight had actually recovered? And for me, that's some of the work that I guess we'll see in time from Mandy's data that we're seeing there. It's as a grower, we all try and grow the best we can as growers for our wine companies, but there's a little thing that I just noticed this year was if we got such a drop in bunch weight and berry weight, that might, on certain conditions, decide that we'll harvest at a different point for ourselves. I think that's all I really got out of the slides there. But we're on R6W clone there on a Paulson stock. So there's the vineyard was sort of planted to grow C and B grade fruit. The analysis that came out of the Yan and those at the end, which is there, I don't understand the numbers a lot in the colour, phenolics and tannin. But they're the three I look at. And given there's 2 tonnes to the hectare and excessive tonnes there in the first place, those numbers didn't vary a lot for the amount of yield that was increased from 21 to 23 season. So I kind of thought we got in the wine, we made a little bit of wine in both those seasons out of there that looks pretty sharp from what we're putting it into. That wine, I think that we're doing that at around $50 retail. So not saying that's industry standard by any chance. Being a smaller producer, you have a little luxury there. So it's really, for me, it was interesting just to see those numbers. In 21, we would have, we were lucky our winemaker was happy to work with what he saw out there. So we didn't have to do any bunch thinning, but in a normal environment, we probably would be. And certainly going forward, we're retargeting that block. In the next year or two, we're trying to reduce everything down. But being the site it is, vine vales or sandy soils can produce pretty decent crops. And if we were to put any more nutrition out there, it would be out of control. And we certainly wouldn't be going back to tilled, even though in a dry year I wonder whether it will conserve moisture later in the season. But yeah, if it mucks it up these wetter years, then it's not. I don't think it's worth it. So, what else do we want to talk about? Questions, I suppose. If we got any questions, happy to answer any of those.
My question was, you weren't tilling the site prior to the trial starting, is that right?
Prior, no. So that ground had been non-tilled for, I'm going to say, a good 10, 15 years prior to that. And I think we were actually expecting that flush of nitrogen to disappear quicker than it has. So I feel that it's probably more than that. It's not necessarily that it's been available, it's done its big spike. This year it's probably the fact it's just that much water in the soil. It's just like a sponge there, it's dead flat ground, it just soaks it up. And it's only place it's going to go is into the vine. So it's got a little bit extra nitrogen hanging around from the cover crop, and that's why for me it's not appropriate on that site. But on a harder sort of soil site type, we would get a different result possibly with that. So
your information on berry weights, variations during the time of the day, related back to your soil treatments. I found that quite interesting, and trying to sort of work out why there'd be those variations. What have you guys come up with in your soul searching?
Hang on. You're talking about this graph? Where we've got variation in bunch weight?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, look, this is probably the first or second year that we've ever trialled this. The measurements from this device. I think as time goes by, it'd be better, if we say, a few more years worth of trials, and then we can really extrapolate whether we are getting those same differences with regards to response to heat waves, etc. As you can see with the straw, I mean, that's a massive drop.
Massive, yeah.
Yeah, but I'd like to see that, like, what would happen on a 40-degree day, or what would happen on a 45-degree day. So I guess time's going to tell to see if we're still going to get those large fluctuations and decreases, or whether, look, this is new cutting-edge technology, and Yeah,
I think so too, and well done for what you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
yeah, I think a little bit of that, it kind of shows that ground cover over the undervine area slows down the loss of moisture or loss of berry weight. So I guess it's another tool that's actually confirmed what probably most people knew would happen on a hot day. Whether there's a quality, again, as a grower, does that spike in soil temperature that reduces your berry weight and causes fluctuations? Does that upset the quality of the fruit's ripening quite steadily and harmonious, and then you put a hot day in and the berry weight changes? Does that, over that happening 4 or 5 times during the, 30, 40 times during the growing season, is that actually taking some quality away, or potentially is it adding? I don't know, but there's one of the questions I sort of ask. Or does it make absolutely no difference? Because you've got 2 extremes there.
Do you have a sense at this stage, if you had to commit to any one of those, or perhaps a combination of 2, which direction you would go?
With regards to...
Oh, golly. The challenge with the site for me as a grower, and very lucky to have an understanding winemaker, has almost received 2 different grades of fruit over maybe 2 different styles as well. The ripening point, sugar-wise, is pretty much always the same. There's not a challenge there. It's the physiological ripening, the flavour profiles we see at the time of harvest. And this year the grass row was the superior row for quality, yet it shared the same BOME and all the same other technical data. The 2 mode cover crop rows probably came in behind that, and then it was the Dura mulch for me, and then bringing home the rear was the straw and the cultivated. The cultivated was it's every year it has been the worst one. On a cost, look, I don't know. Actually, you've got me. My heart was set with the grass rows. That's probably over the 3 years we've done it. I'll probably go there. The straw's probably the straw would be my close follow. I don't have a place for till. I don't have a place for cover crop. So it'd be between those two. Permanent grass, any grass. We just let whatever grows there grow. And the same thing, but with straw under the row. Just being in a wet year, the straw under the row, just got to be mindful it holds onto that early water, and that's going to end up in your canopy. If you can try and, this year we let the grasses grow a little bit more, just to suck it out, just to try and dry it out. Those two are manageable.
Thank you, James and Andy. Thank you.